everyday witches emerge from the shadows of secrecy. Broom closets are flinging open and witches are taking flight. Whether you are hiding in your cozy closet or flying with pride, stay for a spell as Witchcasting with Theodora Pendragon and her guests share magical moments, stir the cauldron, and debunk misinformation and misconceptions about paganism, witches, and our wonderful world of magic.
Here we are for another episode of Witchcasting with Theodora Pendragon. My special guest today is Helen Hardware, and she is a spiritual hypnotherapist. Welcome, Helen.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here.
I'm so happy we're able to connect, and you are my special guest. And today we're going to talk about how you support professional women stepping out of the spiritual closet without worrying about what other people think.
That's right. That's what I specialize in.
So tell us what that means and how you help them, because that's a big thing that I love to talk about.
So I guess what led me here was sort of personal experience. So I have a corporate background, but when I went through my spiritual reawakening, I found myself really drawn to the esoteric world, drawn to healing modalities, but particularly things like past lives, working with energies, working with crystals. And as much as I was desperate to do it, my spirit guides were telling me to do it, I was petrified. I was really worried, what other people going to think? And were they going to judge me? Were they going to reject me or shun me? And who was I to do this? Because I'm an ex-lawyer and banker, and I had attached my identity to it. And I realized that it was a fear that I had to overcome. And as I overcame my fear, what I started to notice was that was what my clients were coming to me for. So coming back to your original question is how I help them. As a spiritual hypnotherapist, obviously I use hypnosis, which is also trance. And if we think about trance as in shamanic healing, shamans have been using trance, which is just an altered state of consciousness, for millennia to connect to the spiritual realms. So I use hypnosis to help people overcome their fears that they've created in this life, but also from past lives. And then to really unleash the confidence to follow what their soul is crying out for them to do.
That's a big job you have there.
It is. And it's an interesting one. It's a very unusual path to have taken, especially for somebody who started out working life as a lawyer.
Can you tell us your process of coming out of the spiritual closet?
Yeah, so the fear of stepping out the spiritual closet, I think, comes down to one of 5 core fears, and it's often more than one. So it's the fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of success, and fear of not being good enough. And I think that the last one is at the heart of a lot of these things. But there's also that sense of not feeling safe to share our spirituality, and that tends to be the fear that comes from past lives. So what I help people do is to find the root cause of where those fears came from in the first place. How did they develop them? Was that a childhood experience? Was that a past life experience? And sometimes it can be inherited. It can be intergenerational trauma as well. And then through various healing tools and techniques using hypnosis, once we understand how that fear was created, then we can do healing work around that. In much the same way that if you've had a childhood trauma, you might do healing work. So it might be around working with the inner child. But with past lives, it works very similarly. We can go back and have a conversation with our past life self. We can give them back their responsibilities, their issues, which at a soul level we're still carrying, but It's not serving us in this life. And we can sever that energetic connection that keeps us tied back to those past lives. So that's very much how I work. And it's a combination of hypnosis with energy healing. I'm an intuitive healer. So while the client is having their own regression experience and seeing, hearing, feeling their childhood scenes or their past life memories, I tend to see what they see. I see sort of a projection in the back of my mind, and I'm able to do energy healing on that at the same time then as they're having their experience.
How do you determine if the issue is a past life, intergenerational trauma, or childhood trauma?
So a couple of different ways. Number one, often a fear is by the time somebody comes to me, they've been working on it for a while, but they haven't managed to get to the root cause. That's usually an indicator that it's in a past life, but you can actually ask the subconscious mind. So quite often I'll help a client set up a what's called an ideomotor signal within hypnosis, where they can put themselves into hypnosis simply by staring at their own hand, and we'll ask the subconscious to move a particular finger for a childhood issue, a different finger for a past life issue, and a third for intergenerational trauma. And we'll wait and see how the subconscious mind responds, and it will actually give us the information. And quite often it's more than one. And then we know where exactly we need to do the healing work.
That's fascinating.
It's quite amazing when it happens. It really blows people's mind.
Let's talk about why stepping out of the spiritual closet is challenging for some people and seemingly easy for others.
I think it comes back to how you feel that others are going to receive it. If we worry that we are going to be judged or shamed, that is a very primordial fear. It's a very human fear. It's connected with our limbic brain, sometimes called our lizard brain, because it's one of the first parts of the human brain that developed, and it's something that lizards still have and haven't really evolved much further. When we were cavemen, for want of a better word, or even earlier, we had this need to be accepted as part of the tribe and a part of the community. And so if we were cast out from the tribe, it made it difficult if we got sick. There was nobody to care for us. If we had children, they say it takes a whole village to raise a child. And back then, it certainly would have taken many eyes, probably. Getting enough to eat. We needed to be part of a tribe for the hunters and gatherers to be able to accumulate enough food and also to have your back. If you were attacked, either as a tribe or out on your own, you needed someone to have your back. You were very vulnerable. So we needed to be part of these tribal communities. And it's a very natural fear of, well, what if we're cast out to them? Because it makes us very susceptible to dangers, to problems, to say even life-threatening attacks. So that's a very primordial human fear that some of us still find really challenging. Or if we've had a past life experience where we've been shunned or shamed or rejected for being different, and that can be in a spiritual way, but it can also simply be for being outspoken, for being a natural healer or an empath or being an intuitive. But sometimes it's simply for questioning the values of the church. And then we go through this sort of experience of being rejected by the tribe or attacked or killed. So they tend to create a lot of fears. For those that sort of sail through the process without any fear about it, I think it's just a matter of the different soul paths and the different soul journeys. And often those souls are very advanced. They've been through a lot of lifetimes. Or alternatively, they may be quite young and inexperienced souls who haven't been through that level of persecution and rejection. So they haven't got that level of fear that's built up. And everybody's unique. Everybody's different. And one of the reasons that when I was struggling stepping out the spiritual closet, I trained originally as a yoga healer, and that was very much connected to my spiritual awakening. And I looked around and went, all I want to do is teach yoga. Why am I so terrified? Thousands of people a year become yoga teachers. Why is this so hard for me? I'm an intelligent professional woman. Why am I finding this so difficult? And it took a good couple of years before I worked out that it was fear. And some people are very good at mastering their fear and pushing through it. And for others, we need to do the deep healing work and the soul growth that comes with that.
You were already a yoga teacher when you were still in the spiritual closet?
Oh, very much so. Yeah. Yeah, I trained in Kundalini yoga, which I definitely had a perception was very weird. And I had all sorts of amazing spiritual experiences going on, but I didn't dare share them with anybody because I thought people would think I was crazy.
Even with your yoga tribe?
Even in part with the yoga tribe, I was also worried as well that if I shared those experiences, that I might be called out as having an ego attachment to those weird and wonderful experiences as well. So there was an element of fear of spiritual shaming going on there. So I found it very hard to talk about. And I do remember raising it at yoga teacher training, and one of the other students actually saying to me, "I don't think you should be talking about that. They're very personal experiences and you shouldn't be sharing that." And looking back now, at the time, it very much upset me, and I felt that I'd done something wrong or bad in some way. And now I recognize that that was her ego kicking in.
It was. She was judgy.
Yes, very.
Yes. It is difficult when people judge us. But we have to let it be their issue.
It is. And it's a human thing to be able to recognize that it's happening, and and recognize our feelings and our emotions when we respond to being judged. But it's also usually, I do believe firmly in the universal mirror. If we are worrying about being judged, it's a big red flag that the universe is reflecting back our own behavior. So, where are we judging others? But more importantly, where are we judging ourselves? And that's when we get the real value in doing the deep shadow work.
I just had an experience just before our interview today. I was at a professional ladies meeting, and we were all talking about what we do. And two of us have podcasts. And when it was my turn to talk about my podcast, I told them what it was about. And one woman, her expression changed. And within minutes, before I could even finish explaining what some of the topics are on my podcast, she said she had to leave, and everybody noticed that she was very uncomfortable.
Yeah. And there's still a misconception that working with the spiritual realms is unsafe in some way. I suppose there is an element of being able to recognize that you need to protect your energy, that we need to work from a place of love and light and ethics, because it can meddle with things that are not necessarily ethical to meddle with. But even when I started doing past life regression, I remember my mother saying to me, "Do you think this is safe? Do you think you should be doing it?" And my answer was, yes, very much so. It's really quite amazing and transformational and mind blowing.
And you were doing it so that people could heal.
That's a really good point, actually, because I don't believe in doing past life regression as a tourist trip. And I wouldn't say that I've never done just curiosity past life sessions, because I certainly have when I was first starting out and learning to do it. But the more that I worked with past lives, the more I worked with clients, the more I recognized that it's a very powerful healing modality, and it's quite an advanced healing modality. I always encourage people not to start with past life healing. If we are like an onion, the outer layers are this life issues and the inner layers are past life issues. But if we were to just take away the middle of the onion, we'd still have this squishy outer layer that's still remaining. So it's far more effective to peel it away a layer at a time. So that's why when I'm working one-on-one with clients, I encourage them very much to start on healing this life before we then start delving deeper into past lives, because we do need to have that almost foundation of having dealt with this life. Otherwise, it can be a bit of an avoidance tactic to not do the work on this life and by blaming it on past lives. And it can be both. So it is about having that sort of ethical approach to how to help clients.
Have you been wanting to ride your broom like you stole it, rather than hiding in the shadows? Theodora Pendragon is here to help your magic shine, whether you want to show the world your subtle sparkle, or you really want to light your fire. Visit Theodora's online store at witchcasting.shop. That's witchcasting.shop. Remember, there's never been a better time to be a witch.
When clients come to you, what are some of the issues they have they want to work on? And you tell them, you know what, we're going to do hypnosis, and this is what the process is, and we're going to find out. What are some of those issues?
So usually most of my clients are small business owners. They've usually transitioned from having a professional career. A lot of my clients are lawyers, doctors, I'm trying to think what else, corporate professionals who have been very successful, but have transitioned into having, or are trying to transition into having an online business. And they want to bring in their spiritual side. They want to talk about energies and intentions and meditations and manifesting, but they're really worried that if they do, they're going to put their clients off massively. So they usually come to me at that stage because they recognize that their confidence is really holding them back. It's stopping them progressing with their business. And they're usually at that point where they're really sick about it. It's kind of sink or swim. They've been playing around in the shallows for so long that they're either going to have to get over this fear and get out there or go back to the corporate world for a while. So it's very much then about sort of helping them unravel that. And I do include business and mindset and coaching as well in my longer programs. It's not just about healing.
Do some people tend to go to more than one past lifetime to resolve their issue?
Yeah, and that's a really interesting one. So there's kind of two approaches that we can take as we're working with past lives. I can either keep a client specifically focused in one past life so that they really see it in depth. But sometimes an issue, like you say, is not from just one past life. It can be from multiple. So it is that intuitive guidance. And I usually work with my guides to know which direction to go in, whether we need to stay in one past life and really see it in depth because there's something buried in the nuances of that life that they need to uncover. Or we will regress back through multiple past lives. The multiple past lives can be really, really effective, but it can also be quite disorientating because you've just got used to seeing yourself in one life and then you're in a whole nother scene and it's a whole nother lifetime. And how does that fit in the jigsaw puzzle? And then we've got to try and unravel that. So I would usually recommend, rather than flitting from one life to another, that we do multiple sessions. So we do them in depth. They really understand who they were in that life, what they did, what everyday life looked like, who are the most important people, which of those people are in their soul group, who do they recognize today, and then actually go all the way through to the end of that life, transition out of that life, which sounds a little bit scary to go through a death scene, but usually it's the most beautiful and liberating experience. It feels quite amazing for most deaths. Admittedly, there are always going to be some that are traumatic deaths, and that's something that we have to deal with. But when we're in the between life state again, that's when a lot of the magic works. That's when we can bring in guides and we do a lot of healing work through reviewing the past life and bringing in the present life self and being able to communicate with the past life self, dialogue backwards and forwards. That's when they can give back old issues and be able to sever things. So there's a whole load of healing tools and techniques that we use at that stage of the process.
You mentioned that they will go through the death process, the dying process. Have you found that most people describe that after they pass away, that it's beautiful?
Very much. And I quite often take people into the between life state on the way to a past life state as well. So by the time they go through a death scene, they've already experienced it, so they know there's nothing to be afraid of. But what quite often happens is in the first experience, when a client arrives in the between life state, they give me one of three answers. In fact, it's always one of three answers. They're either flying around the earth and they're zooming around and they can see lakes and mountains and cities. They're floating in space. They're just surrounded by stars and they feel connected to the universe. Or they describe themselves as being in a white, bluish light. And it's usually quite cloudy. They can't quite see the details. But often they look down and say that they can see kind of a checkerboard floor of white and bluish light. So it is really, really beautiful. And it feels, I suppose, I'm trying to find another superlative that's not beautiful. It just feels amazing. We feel so connected to everything, and especially to source, to the divine, whatever you want to think of that as. So by the time somebody then goes through the death scene, they've already experienced that. They're not as afraid to go through it. And more often than not, I find that most past lives that my clients experience are quite mundane. They're quite ordinary. When people say, oh, lots of people claim to be celebrities, in all honesty, in my experience, it doesn't happen very often. And when it does happen, it can be because they are very advanced souls who are starseeds who have had multiple lives off of Earth, but have answered the call to come to Earth at this time. And to help stabilize them in that life, they've had a lot of training and they've been taught about the history of the planet, and they may have an affiliation to one of those characters. Doesn't mean that they were that character necessarily.
Well, if we can't be famous in this lifetime, we would like to think we're famous in another lifetime, right?
Perhaps, yeah. But for me, what makes it much more real and believable is the fact that most experiences are very ordinary. And it is very much about relationships and love and connection and the things that we are, the everyday, ordinary things that we don't really give much consideration to, but are part of our soul experience.
What is your Earth Soul Star framework? Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so my framework is Earth, Soul, Star, because they're the kind of three areas that I work with. Earth being this life, the experiences that we have in the time between our birth and today. And sometimes it goes back before birth, sometimes it's in utero as well. Soul is past lives because they're soul memories. My personal belief system is that we have multiple past lives where we learn and develop and grow as souls. We spend the time between those lives in a very special, very sacred place. And then the star is because a lot of my clients are starseeds. So that is about activating those very powerful spiritual memories of lives of other planets, other galaxies. It may be on a spaceship, and sometimes it's a whole different dimension. They might be light beings.
How will someone know if they're a starseed?
A lot of us are starseed if we are quite spiritual in our belief system. It's hard to know, but starseeds often have this real sense of not fitting in, that something is a little bit different about them. There's a feeling of wanting to go home, but having no idea where home is. And even when you're in your physical home, it still feels like there's somewhere else you're meant to be. Often starseeds are drawn to looking at the stars and dreaming about what might be. There's no test to see whether you're a starseed. There's plenty of quizzes out there, am I a starseed? But there's no real definitive test. It's more of an intuitive sense. And some people will remember spontaneously lives in other places, other dimensions.
Can this be discovered under hypnosis?
It certainly can, yeah. So just like past lives on Earth, we have past lives in other places, and you can experience those in just the same way.
You said that you're on a mission to ensure that no light worker hides their light. How is your mission going?
I'd like to think that this is my path. For every one of us that walks the spiritual path, we illuminate for those who follow us. If we go back to sort of the mass spiritual awakenings that seem to have started in the 1960s, they really set the scene for those of us that have followed. Yes, it morphs and it develops and it changes, but without those foundations, we wouldn't have the availability that we do today. And I'm sure in another 20 or 50 years' time, the mindset towards spirituality will be very different to what it is today. Going back to the 60s, it was seen as very, very far out and weird and wonderful. And there maybe is an element of that today, but it's a lot more accepted as well. And the joy of the internet is it's enabled us to find our tribes and to be able to connect with people who think and feel and see the world as we do. And it's just going to keep on growing. So for every person that steps out of the spiritual closet and shines their light, they're not only just raising the vibration of the planet, they're holding space for those who follow them.
I love that.
Thank you.
That's beautiful. When you came out of your spiritual closet, were you concerned about your professional credibility?
Completely. I was really worried that I would shoot myself in the foot. And if I needed to go back to the corporate world, who would hire me? Because I would be seen as completely weird and way out there and not have the right mindset to fit in with the traditional corporate culture. But what I found as I started to step out of the spiritual closet when I was still in the corporate world, it did create that that path and that avenue for other people to start to share. What I was amazed about was little things like when I started wearing my crystals to work and having them on my desk, I would then have somebody come up and say, "Oh, what's this one for?" Or somebody else would say, "Oh, I've got a rose quartz that I always wear, or I carry in my bra, or I carry in my pocket." And then that led to people then saying, "Oh, I'm actually a medium, and I communicate with my grandmother." And that, all these things were all done in hushed tones because they didn't want people to know. They didn't want everyone else to think they're weird. But what I started to find is actually an awful lot of people felt the same way. I remember in one team, a fabulous colleague coming and saying, "I'm not sure I'm in the right place. I'm an eclectic witch. I'm not sure I fit in here." And me declaring, "Oh, well, that's wonderful. You're going to fit in brilliantly because we're on the same wavelength." And just enabling her to be able to accept who she was liberating for both of us.
I've noticed that my jewelry opens many conversations, whether the people know what the jewelry is or they want to know because they're curious and they've never seen it. And that's a great educational tool.
It is. I've got a couple of really exquisite pieces that were handmade in Glastonbury, which is, for those who aren't in the UK, it's an amazing spiritual place down in the southwest of the UK. And they always open conversations because they're so unusual and people sort of ask, what are they? What's the stone in them? And what does it mean? And why do I wear it? Now, how many regular, straightforward pieces of jewelry would people ask that length of questions around, but people get a sense that it has meaning and it has importance.
That's right. Because when I look at someone's jewelry, unless it's, something that I would wear, I don't think to ask questions because it doesn't have any meaning to me. But when I see someone wearing a crystal or a pentacle, I get excited.
Absolutely. And I think recent TV shows as well have really opened up these questions to the younger generation. My goddaughter, who's 9, is absolutely fascinated by witchcraft at the moment and is slowly accumulating and growing her crystals. In fact, just on Sunday night, she asked me to remind her what each one of them was for, and was asking me if we could cast some spells together. I've been able to buy some books, get her some dowsing rods. It's amazing. She's really connected with the rods much more than the pendulum. So teaching her those tools and techniques, and she doesn't feel that it's weird because, her heroine is Wednesday Addams, and she just thinks that's amazing that she's able to do these things. So I think the culture is starting to become much more mainstream.
It is. And how old is she?
She's 9.
Oh, that's a great age.
Yeah. She's curious, and she's at that stage where she's now interested in reading books on these topics. So yeah, everyone in the family went, "Oh, see Auntie Helen, she'll sort you out with that."
So the whole family knows about you.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Her mum did say, though, if she was casting spells, she had to do that at my house, not at home.
That's okay. She's still allowed to do it.
Exactly. Yeah. And when she came for a sleepover last time, I got my little mini cauldron out and we set some intentions and we released things that we don't need. And we had a lovely time.
That's so cute. You're the cool aunt.
That's my goal. That really is my goal. Yeah.
She'll always remember that forever.
I hope so. Yeah.
Yeah.
I hope she keeps that open curiosity and acceptance for it and that feeling of magic, because we lose that so often as we grow older. And I think those of us who are out the spiritual closet have learned how to get it back. But I want to help her keep it for as long as possible.
You're right. Things are changing and we're all coming out of those closets.
Yeah. And I mean, I debated for a long time whether the phrase stepping out of the spiritual closet was perhaps offensive. And I had a really great chat with a dear friend who is gay and had stepped out of the closet with her family, but is also a starseed and had to step out of the spiritual closet. And she's, again, a very professional, high-performing woman. And we had a really long discussion, and she said, no, it feels the same. She said that fear of what my family were going to think, what my friends were going to think, was so similar. She said, I felt like I was going through the whole process again. She said, it's the best description.
I'm a therapist, and I've helped many people come out of the rainbow closet, and some of them come out of the spiritual closet after that. And yes, they describe it as being the same. It's no different. So it's just one hurdle at a time.
It is. And I think once we've given ourselves permission to be authentic in one area of our life, it enables us to be authentic in another area of our life and gives us the permission to really be ourselves.
It does. What takeaway would you like the audience to have today?
It's probably asking that question, what's the worst thing that could happen? And then, is it actually likely to happen? So I spent many years as a risk manager. So I bring a very much risk approach to this, which is called impact and likelihood. So the impact is, what's the worst thing that can happen if I was to share my spirituality with others? But then actually think about, how likely is that to really happen? Most people I know, and certainly most of my clients, when we do share our spirituality, people just kind of go, oh, okay, yeah, I always knew you were a bit woo-woo. And they're not surprised. And often the clients are much more worried about how people are going to respond than they actually do in real life. So take that risk approach. What's the worst thing that could happen? What's the best thing that could happen? And what's the likelihood of those happening? And then be prepared to face your fear, because that's all it is that holds us back. It is fear. And that's okay. We're human. We're here to have a human experience. But when we can recognize that it's fear and be willing to face it, that's when we start to unlock the magic.
Unlock the magic. I love that. Unlock the magic. Unlock the magical door. Step out.
Yeah. And that's a process I quite often use with my clients when we're going into a past life. Is you're in a room with lots of magical doors, and which one are you drawn to? And then step through it. And it's a powerful tool. So step through that door and reclaim the life that you were born to live, because as a soul, you chose to come into this life knowing that there was going to be hardships, there was going to be lessons on the way. But it's time to reclaim, your soul energy, your powers, your skills, your abilities, your connections.
How did your relationships change after you stepped out of your closet?
On many levels, they didn't. I think what worried me most was how my husband would respond. I don't think at the time we'd even got married. I think we were recently engaged, and I really worried how he would respond. And he just shrugged and went, yeah, that's cool. Okay, whatever.
So what? Isn't that nice?
It is. And it was so reassuring to know that it's not his bag, it's not his path, but he will support me in whatever I choose to do. And that, to me, that's when I knew that he was definitely the one to marry. Likewise with friends, maybe some friends did fall away, but those friendships had come full circle. And actually what it did was open up space for new connections to come in. So yes, we can fear that we're going to lose those connections that we've got, but we only ever lose what we don't need. And actually, when we do lose something, it's the universe's way of decluttering to make space for something even better to come in.
I like that poem, A Reason, a Season, or a Lifetime. Have you heard that poem?
I haven't, but I'll have to find that. That sounds beautiful.
It is beautiful. Everybody in our life is here for a purpose, a reason, a season, or a lifetime. So you can kind of figure it out. But sometimes when I lose a friendship, I go back and read that poem like, yes, this is where she fits in.
Yeah, and it's very true. Everybody that's in our life is here to help us learn a lesson for some reason. And when we've learned that lesson, they may move on, or they may be here to teach us another one. So I always, if a friendship comes to the end of its life cycle, I release them with love and take gratitude for what I got from that relationship, and know that that void is not empty, and that it's going to be filled with an even greater relationship.
Right. And we can't hold grudges.
No, No, and it's interesting you mentioned that, because I was joking about that the other day. There was some talk of an old school reunion, and that there may be some people that were still holding on to grudges. And I actually went and did some shadow work to say, actually, am I still holding some grudges from when I was 14? And what do I need to do about that? What do I need to release? What do I need to surrender?
Yeah, grudges really don't serve us. I think some people use grudges to hurt the other person, but we're really just hurting ourselves.
It is. And isn't that there's a saying, and I can never remember the exact words, but about anger is the poison that we take ourselves instead of the person that we're angry at.
Because they don't know that we have a grudge, that they're going on with their lives. Yeah, they're going on with their lives, and if someone has a grudge with me, I'm living my life. I have gone through the grieving process of losing that friendship, and then I learned to live my life without them.
Exactly. Yeah. And being able to release with love and recognize that you're not what they need in their life right now, and they're not what you need in your life, as part of that grieving process and being able to move forwards.
Is there anything else you would like to say that we may not have touched on?
I think it's just about coming back to the magic within. We are all those divine souls, and just never losing touch with that. We're all part of the divine in some way, shape, or form, and that we've all got that magic inside of ourselves in whatever way you want to express it and think of yourself.
Thank you for that.
Thank you for asking me. That's a lovely question.
And it was a beautiful answer. Thank you, Helen, for being my special guest today. This has been a lovely episode.
Thank you for the opportunity. It's been great.
Thank you for joining us for Witchcasting with Theodora Pendragon. Have a burning question or have a topic you'd love Theodora and her guests to discuss on the show? Contact her through Instagram at Theodora Pendragon. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And help us spread the word by leaving us a rating and review and sharing it with your friends. See you next time, and may your magic always shine.